So this is a review for Porky the Fireman, released in 1938. It's the 203rd in the series, and it's directed by Frank Tashlin. You can find this beautiful restoration completely uncut on the Looney Tunes Gone Collection Volume 4 DVD set and on the Porky Pig 101 DVD set. I have links below to both those sets. You will not find this on YouTube unless Warner Brothers themselves choose to upload it on their own channel, as it is a copyrighted short. And because of one scene, I highly doubt they will, so you're better off buying those sets. But in case you haven't seen this one, there's not much to it story-wise. You have Porky, who's a fireman, hence the title of course, and along with other firemen, they just set out to put out a fire, and that's pretty much it. And we just see a lot of gags around that. But I'll break down this short anyway, and we'll go through some of the references within that you may or may not have known. Now, after I go through the breakdown of the short and go through those references, my good friend Manny Cruz, the Toony tenor, he's going to pop on by and give his thoughts on the short as well and go through the musical references. This is a childhood favorite of his, and he begged me to come on. I said, fine, if it's your favorite, why not? And he actually does a very in-depth breakdown of one particular cue and just shows how complex things can be for something that just goes by in a matter of maybe 10 or 20 seconds. It's really good. I hope you stick around for that. And then my good friend Austin Kelly, he's been on all the Frank Tashlin reviews. He's going to give his thoughts as well. So without further ado, let's get into it. So with this short, by this point, Tashlin, you can just tell he's had enough of Porky and pretty much he's obligated to do so. So he does this short, but he does what Clampett's been doing and just putting him to the side and focusing on other funnier characters. But that's fine. At least the short's entertaining. But it's not long now that Tashlin will stop doing the Porky shorts anyway, and then he'll just do the Merry Melodies, but not long after that, he ends up leaving Warner Brothers for the second time. Because in case you're new to the channel, Tashlin was at the studio 3 times. He was at the studio as an animator, first of all, in 33, 34 before he was fired, and then he came back as a director for a few years, between 36 and 38, and then he left again, went to Disney, then went to Screen Gems, and then came back to Warner Brothers and did a third and final stint between 43 and 45. So he's definitely a here today, gone tomorrow kind of person, but yeah, you can definitely tell by this point he was losing interest in Porky, and he's admitted as much that he wasn't really a fan of the character. But if you watch a lot of his Porky shorts, you really couldn't tell. He was still a professional to the very end, and that's something I definitely admire about him, aside from the fact he's a damn good director. But let's go through this short from start to finish. But wow, we start off with a bang, or a crash at least in this case, because we hear the bells going off at the firehouse because, hey, there's a fire. In this one, Tashlin definitely sussed things really fast. In a few of his shorts, he likes to start things slow and then pick up the pace towards the end, but in this case, no, he starts off all guns blazing, in a very funny gag, by the way, where the doors are open, but no, the fire truck just goes from the side. I wonder how often they've had to fix up this firehouse. I mean, it looks kind of ramshackle anyway, but in any case, wow, what an opening, not even a few seconds into it, and we start off with a bang. And we see some very cinematic shots of this fire truck, which looks like a sports car of some kind with a few hoses attached. It's kind of a weird design for a fire truck, but anyway. And then the truck is speeding through the city streets on its way to the fire. But I like the fact if you pause on a lot of the imagery, that's probably the crudest looking Porky Pig I've ever seen. I mean, granted, it wasn't meant to be freeze frame like this. It would have been shown on film back in the day, but it's still amusing to look at. And even that 3D shot of going down the street, it's just fantastic. Did Tashlin need to do that? No. But he does it anyway, and it just adds to the cinematic quality of this. Granted, yes, the buildings are kind of bare and all that, but whatever, he gets the point across. And of course, Tashlin has to stop the fire truck because we got some cats crossing the street. Black cats, of course. But I love the music, the pizzicato of when the cats cross the street. Cats? Pizzicato? Almost had a gag there. But we arrive at this building which is on fire. Again, I know this is not meant to be freeze-framed or paused because it was shown on film, but I'm just fascinated by seeing a lot of the crude drawings in this one of all the people escaping from the fire in that establishing shot. And we even got that touch on top saying, help. Don't know why the fire is calling out for help, but in any case, Now, when the fire truck stops and top part just falls off, I mean, that's one flimsy fire truck, I like on the background it says Opera House Tonight, Looney Tunes. Now, my friend Austin Kelly has a point to make about that one, and I'll wait for you guys to hear that because I was wondering why they would have written that down, but there's definitely a commentary there between high and low art, and I'll let Austin explain that later on. But gee, those firemen must be really strong to bring back that entire vehicle and reattach it like that. And again, just look how crude Porky's drawn in this scene. It's hilarious. But of course, why are they clocking in at the actual fire truck itself? You would assume that they would do that at the fire station. It's such a weird little gag there, but it's funny enough. And yes, people used to literally punch on. They had a whole punching machine and they would clock in with their cards. But we get a little cherry on top with this scene where, of course, it also doubles as a slot machine for some weird reason. But some wonderful animation in that scene as well, just of Porky going back and forward between the machine. He's trying to get the hose ready to fight the fire, and it's definitely a stark contrast to that really crude-looking Porky from earlier on. So now we've got to fight the fire, and again, the fire says, "Thanks, boys." Doesn't the fire want to live? Oh, well, moving on. Now we get to a bit where I'm going to let Manny go through this one in depth, because this is one of his favorite scenes of all time in terms of Looney Tunes, and I can't blame him. This is hilarious. I love this Tashlin dog that's also appeared in one earlier Tashlin short, but in this case, we've got this gag where things were pretty fast-paced up until this point, but then Tashlin takes his time just to tell this one hilarious gag where Porky's trying to tell him to turn on the water, but the dog walks all the way up just for him to say, "What did you say?" And pissed off Porky is the best Porky. And I like the cruder version of Pissed Off Porky compared to later on where he'd be angry in a few Chuck Jones shorts, but here he's just raw emotion, and who can blame him? This dog shouldn't be in the fire brigade if he's actually, deaf. But despite this gag taking a while to get going, that's why it works. It's so good. I like the payoff where he finally turns on the water, but clearly there's not enough water pressure, even though it looks like there is, because it ends up just dripping at the end as opposed to full blast like it should. So Porky decides to fight the fire the old-fashioned way and get a bucket. He shoos a couple of dogs away, fills up the bucket, goes to the window, but as you'd expect, the fire comes alive and then splashes him. But didn't the fire say thank you before? I don't know, it's kind of weird. But we find out that this place that's on fire is a theatrical boarding house, which gives Tashlin ample opportunity to have weird and wonderful eclectic characters here. So it's a good idea. Because the story itself, it's very basic. It's just main character fighting a fire and seeing how many gags we have. And in this case, we've got a theatrical boarding house, so it mixes things up a bit. Although if you look at the welcome mat, why does it say welcome me? Is that slang, or did certain folks spell welcome with an extra E at the end? Kind of weird. But for those familiar with the retrace version, not the computer colorized version, because this short, yes, it's original black and white, and that's what I'm showing you here, completely uncut, of course. But it was traced as one of the infamous Korean redraws where they traced every second or third frame, and then you had the computer colorized version. I'm assuming that they did, but let me know if they fixed that error or not if you're familiar with those versions. And we pan up and we see Mabel the Fat Lady, and we know this because she even carries a bag that calls herself Mabel the Fat Lady. Well, here's an early example of body positivity, I guess, but in any case, she's yelling out for help. And yes, we're going to get your stock standard save the fat lady type gag. And yeah, I know, I kind of feel bad saying that, but it is what it is, right?
Oh, get me down out of here! Oh, hurry, save me! Help! Save me! Oh, get me down! Hurry!
What did you say?
I said get me down out of here! Put me on the street!
Then we get another repeat of that Tashlin dog going all the way up saying, "What did you say?" Now, it doesn't go on as long as the first time, but I wonder if this would have worked a little bit better if he just simply repeated what was before, where the dog took ages to go up, to follow the hose, and then go up this ladder. But look, it's funny the way it is, but maybe he wanted to do that, but it was made to cut it. I don't know. But we see that the dog is going up saying, "What did you say?" And this lady, she ain't happy. She wants to be saved. But I like how this Tashlin dog says, "Oh," after he's told exactly what she wants, which is to be put down onto the street. He's a pretty strong dog, isn't he? He just picks her up and just throws her down. But it seems like we're much higher up than we're led to believe because it takes quite a while for her to land on the ground. But in any case, she's on the ground and she's fallen out to her death. And then we get a stereotypical old man with a long beard because that was the style at the time. Now, at this point, I'm just going to point out a few vocal credits here because it's actually a bit incomplete here. This comes from Keith Scott's Wonderful Cartoon Voices book, and I'll link to that book. But Mel Blanc, of course, does Porky Pig, he does the deaf fireman and the old man. He also says here Joe Twerp with a question mark next to old man as well, which is kind of interesting because this is Mrs. Twerp's theatrical boarding house, and yet he's got an actor named Joe Twerp here, so it's an interesting coincidence. Ted Pierce does the falling man and the unfortunate stereotype we're about to see, but he's actually not sure who does the woman voice, so hopefully further information will come to light regarding that. Because it certainly doesn't sound like any woman actor I've heard before, like Sarah Burner or anyone like that. So yeah, hopefully that information will come to light. So Porky sees this long-bearded man goes up, but this weird ladder has the side part, which is pretty much a reference to the railroads at the time, because there will be a lot of single-track sections where there'll be like a crossing loop of some kind. So this is pretty much playing on that. But why a traffic light? Why not? But we see that this old man's kind of loony because he says, "Don't save me, save Grandpa," and his beard serves as a parachute as well.
I'll save you.
Don't worry about me. Go save Grandpa.
Very weird gag, but I've always loved these old coots that you see in a lot of the older shorts like this. They always have to have impossibly long beards. Then we get a little funny scene involving them trying to put out this fire, but the fire is still sentient and decides to play a game with the firemen. By this point, it looks like this building would have to be condemned anyway, so maybe they should just let this building fall to the ground and that's that. But in any case, then we get a wonderful bit of animation of Porky with the hose, and again, Tashlin didn't have to do this, but I like the added touch here. So he's running up with the hose, but then he ends up getting tangled in the hose, and that's a nice one to freeze frame. Any other director might have avoided doing that because it's a lot of extra work, but no, it definitely adds to the scene. So Porky plugs up the hose, and hopefully this time around we're going to get some more water coming out from this hose. But it's a funny little trope where he plugs one end, water comes out from another, and so on and so forth. It's a silly little gag, but hey, it works. Especially how there's someone with a squirt bottle underneath as soon as he lifts up the entire hydrant. And that just happens to be that Tashlin dog. Why is he doing this? Maybe he doesn't think Porky's a good boss. Maybe he wants to muscle in and be the fire chief. I don't know. Now we see Lucy, the bearded lady. And I like that shot of Porky on the ladder there. It's a kind of a weird shot. Again, it's a crudely drawn Porky. I love these crude drawn Porkies. And the background, it's a very simple background, very painted. I guess it's one way for Tashlin to cut some of the costs down, given how ambitious it can be in certain shots. So now we see Porky ordering another fireman to wind it up so we can rescue this bearded lady. And naturally, the lady gets very overexcited and ends up going through in an impossible way. Love the timing to the music here. But because this is a theatrical boarding house, we see the flying Leroys, as we'll know in just a moment, going out the window, beautifully timed to the music. Why they would be so dramatic trying to save themselves, who knows? It's still a pretty interesting scene. Although I like how, again, there's a lot of crudely drawn characters in this one, and these characters are pretty crude as well. But if you know the reference to the Flying Leroys, let me know in the comments below, because I couldn't find anything directly related. There were definitely a lot of acrobatic groups around in circuses, because circuses were big at the time, but if it's referring to something specific, definitely let me know. Then we see a bit that would have been cut from TV, and with good reason. So we see this other falling man, voiced by Ted Pierce. He goes through a cloud of black smoke and ends up in a blackface caricature. That is actually a caricature of Stephen Fetchit, and he was an actor at the time, actually a very highly paid actor. He'd been in a lot of movies, and the whole thing would be that he'll play this dim-witted character. Hence why every time you see him caricatured in Looney Tunes shorts, or any other shorts for that matter, he just comes across somewhat dim-witted. Very controversial today, but that's where all that comes from. But I wonder if when they did the Korean redraw, did they even bother to retrace it, or did they cut it beforehand? But Porky seemingly had enough, so he decides that instead of fighting fire with water, he just decides to collect it up and then deposit it into a goldfish bowl. Of course, we get a blackface fish gag. Yeah, never thought I'd say that, but that's what happens here. But now all the hoses seem to be working as all the firemen try and put out this fire. and the whole building wall ends up falling through, and they continue to fight the fire. I wonder if Tashlin was inspired by Buster Keaton for this bit, because there's definitely a famous gag where Buster Keaton, he is standing still and the whole wall falls down and he ends up popping through a window completely unscathed, and that would have been very dangerous to do at the time. A lot of mathematical calculations as to where he could safely stand, but I wonder if Tashlin was inspired by that scene for that bit. And I guess in one way to save a bit of money and a bit of time here, we get a montage, which Tashlin does in quite a few of his shorts, of stuff we've already actually seen. So rather, instead of animating new stuff of them continuing to fight the fire, he just reuses animation from before, but it does the job. But as you'd expect, given how long they've taken to fight this fire, the building is completely gone. But I like how Tashlin takes his time when the building is completely ruined. We slowly see the sentient fire pop up, confused at what's going on, and then all those firemen just pop out of nowhere, crowding the scene, and end up putting out that fire. And it's a magnificent scene, because that would have been a lot of work with all those characters just for that one brief moment there. I wonder if he took any shortcuts to get this one done a lot quicker, because if this was done by one person or something, that would have taken them forever to do. I'm looking at the frame now, and I'm just trying to see what sort of shortcuts he would have taken to get this done, or did he just work overtime just for this one bit? I don't know. I mean, the animation itself of those firemen putting out the fire is simplistic enough, but we're talking about lots of different characters actually being drawn here. But the fire itself takes revenge, picks up the hose, and shoots everyone down like it's a machine gun. Yeah, that's one pissed off fire, and even yells like Tarzan. Although you do have to wonder where Porky is, because again, as I mentioned in the beginning, you see Porky in a few scenes, but the focus seems to be on these other funnier characters, and Porky's not even at the very end. Maybe he died during this fire. R.I.P. Porky, I guess. But I've been prattling on long enough, so first of all, you're going to hear my good friend Manny Cruz, the Toonie Tenor. He's going to go through all those musical cues, including that bit with the Tashlin dog, that wonderful gag I mentioned before, plus other observations. Then straight after that, you'll hear from Austin Kelly. And while myself and Manny Cruz have a very positive take on this short, Austin, less so, but he goes through why, and I totally get his point of view. So, without further ado, let's start off with Manny Cruz.
Hi everyone, this is Manny Cruz, the Toonie Tenor, coming at you with the latest edition of It's Time for Manny's Music Time, with music trivia for you today. Bum! For the 1938 Looney Tune cartoon, Porky the Fireman, directed by my fellow Jersey boy, Frank Tashlin. So, once again, I've invaded a Looney Tune instead of a Merry Melody for Manny's Music Time, because I asked Anthony, I begged and pleaded. I was like, oh, please. I think he wanted to light me on fire. Come on, baby, light my fire. My favorite band, who knew that I would reference the Doors in this commentary, but I asked him to come on for this one. Porky the Fireman is a personal favorite short of mine. It's one of my absolute favorites from when I was a kid, because this one used to air a lot on Looney Tunes on Nickelodeon. I still love this cartoon to this day. It is one of my favorite Frank Tashlin cartoons, and revisiting it, it's been a while since I've seen it. I still enjoy it. I still find it funny, and there's just some things musically that I have to talk about, specifically one scene that still makes me smile to this day. So let's jump into it. So obviously the cartoon, the musical direction is by the great Carl Stalling, and phenomenal orchestration in this cartoon by Milt Franklin, and I'll get to that in a little bit. So the cartoon obviously starts off with The Merry-Go-Round Broke Down, the Looney Tunes theme song by Cliff Friend and Dave Franklin. And then in the opening titles, and there's something about these Looney Tunes from 1938, the way that the title cards are designed. I'm thinking of this when I'm thinking of Porky's Hare Hunt. The lettering that they use, the font, and I don't know, there was something about the title cards in like the 1937, 38, 39 seasons that I really like, seeing the lettering and how the letters and are curved, and I don't know, there's something about it, that design aesthetic, that I really like. So yes, once again, the opening titles of this cartoon starts with the song Sing You Son of a Gun, with lyrics by Johnny Mercer, and the music is by Richard Whiting. I'll talk a little bit more about Richard Whiting in another commentary, but I do want to get to him in a few shots. This song comes from the 1937 film Hollywood Hotel, and in the film, the song is sung by Dick Powell And you hear this in other Warner Brothers shorts. And you only hear a little snippet of this one, but I like that little fanfare opening. And then I looked at the name of the song. I was like, oh, kind of interesting considering the time period. But it's a nice song. Ba 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 bum ba da 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 da. That you don't hear the main part of the song. You only hear the little snippet in the very beginning. So if you want more information about Johnny Mercer, please check out the commentary that I did for another Tashlin short from the same year, Porky the Crocodero. Now, you see the cartoon. I like how after Sing You Son of a Gun finishes, the cartoon starts off with the sound of the fire bell ringing, letting him know, oh, we got to get on the scene. I like that. It's just another example of Tashlin. He was a big cinema fan. It's just, you'll notice in his cartoon and his other shorts, the way that he angles the shots, and he's definitely looking at it from the perspective of a live-action film director as opposed to an animation director, and thank goodness he did that and kind of pushed the medium further. But I just like the fact that everything is quiet except for the sound of the bell. And then the music starts, bum-bum-bum-bum-bum-bum-bum-bum. And what is that? That piece is called Traffic by J.S. Zemishnik. So once the fire engine, in a really funny gag, it bursts out of the firehouse, not through the front, of course, but through the side, and it starts making its way around town, making my way downtown. Look at that. Now I'm referencing, was it Vanessa Carlton? Where did that come from? Wow, my brain is jumping all over. But now I know it's because I have ADHD. So, hey, friends. Haha. And also, I think of Firehouse. I'm thinking of Ghostbusters. There's my Ghostbusters reference for the day. But now you got to play Cleaning Up the Town, which is the song you hear when the Ectomobile comes out of the firehouse. I am truly a mess. I don't know how Anthony's going to edit this one. But anywho. I love this particular cue. You hear Traffic used throughout the short, especially during the scenes where Porky is struggling to get water, when he's going to the fire hydrant and the dogs are there, and he's like, shoo, get out of here. Just like talking to my dog Nina all the time, shoo, get out of here. And also later on when he's trying to plug the hose into the fire hydrant and he's struggling with the different inputs, outputs, whatever you want to call it. And another short that comes to mind when I think of this specific cue, which is another childhood short, is 1943's Falling Hair by Bob Clampett. So I always think of these two shorts whenever I think of this specific thing. So if you do want to know more about J.S. Zemishnik, because Carl Stalling did use a lot of his cues, as well as his predecessors, Norman Spencer and so on, definitely check out the commentary I did for My Green Fedora if you want to know more about Zemishnik's work. In some earlier commentaries, I pronounce it Zemechnik, but it's Zemishnik. So my bad on that. So the firefighters are there at the scene, and they need to punch in, clock in, whatever you want to say. The old-fashioned way, literally, you have the card and you have to punch a hole to let you know that you're showing up to work. And what's the song you hear? It Looks Like a Big Time Tonight by Egbert Van Alstyne and Harry Williams. So this song was first published in 1908, and you do hear it in other Warner Brothers shorts, and that's a nice little tune to let you know, hey, these guys are here to save the day. Now, the next cue, you know what? I'm going to skip this one because this is the part of the cartoon that still makes me laugh to this day. So I'm going to skip this cue. I'll go to the next one. So later on in the cartoon, you hear Old King Cole by Johnny Mercer and Richard Whiting again. This is the song you hear when Grandpa is being rescued by Porky. And this is a joke that I've never understood. Now, don't worry about me, worry about Grandpa. And, you know, Grandpa, I'm using air quotes, jumps out and he uses his beard as a parachute. I mean, I have a beard, but mine can't do that. And I never understood that joke. I'm like, what? But he's an elderly man, and I don't know. So probably Anthony will explain it, or if somebody in the comments, please, like, fill me in, because I never got that joke. But I still like the cartoon, obviously. As for the song Old King Cole, I'll go a little bit more in depth when I get to another Tashlin short for Manny's Music Time, Have You Got Any Castles? Because in that cartoon it has an extended scene with this song, and they have the bass who sings Old King Cole's part in the cartoon. And my God, that voice is just, oh, I wish I had those low notes. So, moving on, you hear The Old Apple Tree by M.K. Jerome and Jack Scholl. This is the song you hear when Porky starts trying to rescue the bearded lady, and then later on you see the Flying Leroys escape the firehouse. Bum, ba-dum, bum, bum, bum. Little, was it Shave and a Haircut, 2 Bits reference here. And then the scene that I never knew existed until I bought the Golden Collection DVD years ago. Hopefully my Golden Collection DVD is still working because of the whole disc rot issue. So if you have those Golden Collections from the late 2000s, folks, you might want to check on them and see if they're still working. I need to do that myself. And the unfortunate caricature of Step Infection said, I never knew that there was a scene of a stereotype until I bought the DVDs. And now I heard the voice. I was like, that sounds like Ted Pierce. And apparently I was right. So go me. Now, that specific song, The Old Apple Tree, came out around the same time it came from a film in 1938, but I don't want to go too much in depth with it. I'm going to leave it for a future Manny's Music Time. In particular, another childhood cartoon that actually scared me, and I'll tell you why when I get to that commentary. 1939's Gold Rush Days by Ben Hardaway and Cal Dalton, because that cartoon features an extended version of this song in it with alternate lyrics. So wait till you get to there and hear my harrowing story of why that cartoon scared me as a child. Now, speaking of scary or sadness, the final cue that you hear in a cartoon, well, like I said, there's one more that I talk about after this one, but the final one you hear is a very brief snippet of the Funeral March by Frédéric Chopin.
Minute Waltz by Chopin.
Not Chopin, you know, a lot of people would pronounce his name, so Frédéric Chopin. A little bit about Chopin. He was born March 1st, 1810, died October 17th, 1849, so sadly did not live very long. He was only 39. He was a Polish composer, and he also spent time in France later on in his life. He went to France, in Paris in particular, and had a prominent career as a composer and as a pianist. And all of his compositions feature piano. Some of his music's extremely difficult to play because, yeah, the guy was a phenomenal pianist. And if you could play Chopin's music really well, then you are upper echelon, cream of the crop in terms of piano abilities. I can't play it because I'm not a very good piano player, but I have friends that have played some of Chopin's pieces, and it's just phenomenal music. All right, let's talk about the cue that I skipped. It's actually going to be not as intense as I wanted to be because here's the problem. The name of the song is also the name of one of the merry melodies that I have to talk about in the future for Manny's Music Time. But I just have to talk about the way it's used in this cartoon. So you're like, Manny, get to the point. What are you talking about? I am talking about Boulevard from the Bronx, which was written by our friends Harry Warren and Al Dubin, as I've said multiple times, the Lennon and McCartney of the Warner Brothers world. So if you want to learn more about Harry Warren, please check out the commentary for a great big bunch of you, and Al Dubin, The Girl on the Ironing Board. This is the piece of music that is used for this character. I like to call him the Tashlin dog. This is his second appearance, and after that, he never appeared again. He was in 2 cartoons by Frank Tashlin. The first time he appeared was in 1937's Porky's Building, and in that cartoon, he's voiced by Ted Pierce. And in that cartoon, it also uses Boulevard from the Bronx. So this is kind of like his theme song. So in Porky's Building, he goes, "Stick back, folks, you bother me." And every time that he walked in that cartoon, you hear Boulevard from the Bronx. But in his return appearance in this cartoon, his voice now is by the phenomenal Mel Blanc doing a really deep voice. And instead of saying, "Step back, folks, you bother me." "What did you say? What did you say? Oh." Just that. "What did you say?" and "Step back, folks, you bother me." Right there. He's like one of my personal favorite obscure Looney Tune characters. I would say, honestly, him and Lawyer Goodwill are definitely 2 of my favorite obscure Looney Tune characters. And look, they're both from Frank Tashlin cartoons. But there's just something about the way that the dog is, especially in this cartoon. He's leaning on the fire hydrant. He's smoking his pipe. Porky's like, "Come on, dude. Like, come on, you know, turn the water on." And then when you start hearing the music, and Anthony, please put the little snippet of the dog walking around the house. You don't understand how much joy I got as a kid whenever this cartoon would come on, and I would listen to the music, and it made me so happy. It's so goofy, it's so ridiculous the way that Stalling arranged it and Milt Franklin orchestrated it. And still to this day, when I was doing a rewatch of this cartoon prior to doing this recording, I'm grinning like an idiot because this music always makes me smile and laugh the way that it's done. It's so funny in the way that it's orchestrated. So when the melody starts initially, you hear it being played. It sounds like a bassoon to me. So on and so forth. So you hear the bassoon playing. And then you hear a little bit of the xylophone coming in. So on and so forth. So the Tashlin dog, he gets a Porky, and it makes me laugh when he always goes, "What did you say?"
What did you say?
I said, turn on the water.
Oh.
And it's actually rather poignant that I do this now because I had an ear infection about 2 weeks ago, and I'm still not 100% with my hearing, so I can understand where the Tashlin dog is coming at. And I love seeing angry Porky during this time period. Turn on the water! Oh. And then when he starts walking back, it sounds like the melody of Boulevard from the Bronx is done by both a bass clarinet and a piccolo. So you have one of the lowest instruments and one of the highest instruments in the orchestra playing the melody simultaneously, and you still hear little snippets of the xylophone playing in the background. It just astounds me the ideas that Carl Stalling came with the arrangement of these cartoons, but in particular, I really, really got to shout out Milt Franklin, because one of these days I have to do like a whole big retrospective on Milt Franklin. Milt Franklin was a woodwind player, and he specialized in the woodwind. So obviously the woodwind family, one of the four main families of the orchestra. You have the clarinets, the flutes, the oboes, the bassoons, piccolos, corn anglais, or the English horn, so on and so forth. So, instruments like the flute that you blow into a hole, clarinets, which are single reed instruments, bass clarinets, saxophones, even though saxophones are not orchestral instruments, but they're single reed instruments, and then the double reeds like the corn anglais and the bassoon and the oboe. And this is Milt Franklin's specialty. He specializes in woodwinds, and the way that he knows specifically which woodwind instruments to use for this scene to really punch up the ridiculousness of the music and just how nicely it plays with just this dog is taking his dear sweet time. He's going exactly in the root of the hose, and then all that works just to tell Porky, hey, I couldn't hear you. You want to repeat that? In my opinion, it is one of the funniest and best uses of music in any Warner Brothers short. I wish more people knew about it. And again, I'm biased because I love this cartoon and I saw it a ton as a kid. And if I have to pinpoint specific musical cues in Warner Brothers shorts that always bring me joy, I mean, the beginning of You Ought to Be in Pictures, the Friz Freleng short, that's one that comes to mind. California, Here I Come, during Hair Raising Hair, when Bugs is packing up and he's trying to escape Gossamer and the evil scientist. You Must Have Been a Beautiful Baby from Daffy Duck and the Dinosaur from 1939. The way that it's played, when you see all the signs leading up to the big duck at the end of the cartoon with the Jack Benny caveman, and then this cartoon with Boulevard from the Bronx. I could just listen to this specific scene musically, and it just puts a smile on my face every single time I hear it. And of course, you hear Boulevardier in the Bronx a few more times. In the cartoon, you hear it in the 3 times that the Tashlin dog is here. So when he talks to Porky initially, when he rescues the fat lady, I feel a little mean saying that, but the large lady. And I know it's not the nicest gag to laugh at now, but when he picks her up and he just tosses her and the ground shakes. I know it's a cheap gag, but I chuckled a bit, I know. Shame on me, because I'm struggling with my own weight myself, so I get it. But just the smugness of this dog, and he's just leaning there. And then, of course, when he lets her go, you hear a snare drum doing a drum roll. And then when Porky's climbing the stairs or the ladder, and then the Tashlin dog with the stop sign to go, and he walks down, and then the final time where he squirts Porky in the face when Porky's trying to figure out, why is this fire hydrant not working? But the Bob Clampett auction. There's so much stuff that I wanted to get, but obviously it's a lot of money. But the one thing in particular that I wanted to get was original sheet music by Carl Stalling for one of my favorite shorts, The Case of the Stuttering Pig. And I bid on it. I was willing to spend a few $100s, but somebody paid close to $2,000 for 3 pages of sheet music. If I had the means, I would have gotten it, no questions asked. But it's unfortunate that I couldn't get the sheet music for 3 pages, but still, it's Carl Stalling's actual work that he did for The Case of the Stuttering Pig. And I love that short, obviously, but man, what I do to get that sheet music for Boulevard here from the Bronx still exists to this day. I'd be willing to spend maybe several $1,000s just to get it. The ability to look at it and just see how Stalling arranged it or how Milt Franklin orchestrated it. Again, just the brilliant, clever use of woodwind instruments to really punch home the joke, the silliness, the ridiculous of the music. And before I forget, when the Tashlin dog is returning back, just before he turns on the hose, and of course the payoff to the joke is just a little drop of water comes out. But after you hear the melody, and then you hear these little harsh dissonant chords coming from the brass instruments, the trumpets and whatnot, dun 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 dun, and it goes back to the main melody, and then it finishes right when the Tashlin dog turns the hoses on. I love the way that it was written here, and I wish I had the means to see them recording this live with the Warner Brothers Studio Orchestra, but sadly time travel is unavailable at the moment. I know this year is the 40th anniversary of Back to the Future. You figured we would have a DeLorean by now, but that is not the case. And I said I wouldn't go too much in depth for Boulevard here for the Bronx, but for the song itself, I mean, I did, I guess, most of the heavy lifting. So, hey, Anthony, now I don't have to do the Manny's Music Time for the short. No, I'm kidding. I'll still do it. But yeah, I love that scene. I love the music. I love the Tashlin dog. I wish he could appear one day again in, I don't know, a future production. But who knows? We'll see. Maybe if they do a sequel to The Day the Earth Blew Up, they'll do the Tashlin dog. And what did you say? I love that part so much. All right, I've rambled long enough. So thanks, folks. It's getting late. Those are my thoughts for Porky the Fireman. Again, a personal favorite of mine. One of my absolute favorites from Tashlin. Love this short. So good to see you again. And it brings me joy, you know, the simpler days when I was a wee little lad watching this cartoon. Most likely the computer colorized version. I don't remember seeing the redrawn one, but I definitely saw the computer colorized one as a kid on Nickelodeon back sometime, I don't know, 1996, 95, 4, whatever it may be. Many, many years ago, a simpler time. So thanks for listening, everybody. I was on a roll today in this commentary. You could say I was spitting hot fire. Huh? 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 That was terrible. Please insert booing sound effect here. So please follow me on social media at the Toony Tenor, TheTooneyTenor, for my life as a musician. I'm a classical musician. I sing in opera, art songs, choir music, salsa music, whatever. You know, I love doing musical research, and obviously I'm a big nerd. A multifaceted geek. I'm talking about Looney Tunes, Ninja Turtles, Ghostbusters, Avatar, and The Simpsons, and other stuff that I'm interested in. And obviously, I love Looney Tunes and Merry Melodies. They're part of my life's work. So thanks for listening. Thanks for supporting Anthony's phenomenal work, and I hope to see you soon. Everybody, stay safe, whether it's a fire, whether it's any other danger, whether it's incompetence on a large-scale national level. Everybody, stay safe, take care of each other, watch some cartoons, listen to some awesome music, and I'll see you soon. Thanks for supporting the channel, and I'm trying to think of a way to end this with a fire pun. I mean, I guess we could strike this recording from, get it? Strike like a match. You know, that was my fire pun. What's wrong with me tonight? I'm getting all fired up. I guess it's time, you know, to put put out this fire of nonsense I'm talking. See, there's another one. I'm just all hot under the collar. See, hot is another. Okay, I'm done. Bye, everyone. See you soon. And that's all, folks. Fire! 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 There you go. That was a Beavis and Butthead. Okay, I'm done. Bye.
This is Austin Kelly coming to you again to talk about another Frank Tashlin cartoon, and unfortunately, another one that's kind of unremarkable, which is an insult to say because even the least remarkable Warner cartoons still have so much interesting stuff about them. This is Porky the Fireman. It's one of the last he did, Tashlin, before he sort of took a leave for a little while. And then, of course, he would come back later and do more black and white Porkies and more color cartoons and got a crack at doing some Daffy and Bugs and all that good stuff. Porky the Fireman, we all know Frank Tashlin was a little bored of Porky, kind of had a disdain for him, but, I mean, it's never been more on display than it is here. I mean, he really just casts that guy to the side right away. I mean, he doesn't even try to pretend like he's the star of this cartoon. I mean, the title is such a misnomer because there's really nothing to do with Porky in this whole thing. And I think what struck me as interesting is that if you have a character that's supposed to be starring in your film, you kind of expect him to be there at the beginning and the end. And Porky's not there in the opening or the closing of this cartoon. So really, it's funny to see how quickly Tashlin just kind of threw him away. It's a spot gag cartoon, essentially, but like his colleague Friz Freleng, Tashlin was so good at timing gags and stuff that he didn't really need a story. He just sort of needed a setup, and then he would use gags within there. So it's not like he doesn't have plenty of opportunity to shine here, which he does. And as good as he was at making these cartoons, all these fast-paced, funny gags, especially from how he throws Porky to the side, but also for a few other reasons. You can really tell that he's kind of getting fed up with all of it. Like, there's a scene towards the beginning where the top of the fire engine shoots off and the firefighters run back and put it back on the wheels, and you see the banner on the back that advertises an opera house that's showing Looney Tunes. And to me, that kind of felt like Tashlin was making fun of what he was doing, as if it could ever be considered high culture. Of course, nowadays, I mean, plenty of people respect the old cartoons, and they are high culture and very, very well done. And of course, Tashlin was very good at doing it, but I guess that just goes to show that he really did not love what he was doing, or maybe just didn't believe in it as much. Well, anyway, it's so interesting to see him experiment with pace here. I mean, this strikes me as a very fast cartoon, and it's probably one of the shortest the studio ever did. I think it's like 6 minutes, 12 seconds. And the shortest they ever did was, I think, like September in the Rain by Freleng, which I think was like 5:50. And then there are a couple Roadrunners from late in the 50s that were around the same length. So I would have to check on that. Two other things of note. Something I found interesting is that I was watching back a Cartoon Network print of this when I was preparing to talk about this cartoon. And it's funny that I knew they would cut the gag of the guy falling through the smoke and then coming out on the other side doing blackface. So they did cut that, but they didn't cut the part where Porky throws the fire into the fishbowl and then the fish do blackface. Like, I know the guy doing blackface is much more pronounced, and like they kind of hold on to it for a couple seconds longer probably, but still, that seemed a little hypocritical to me. Like, you should cut the fish part too if you're going to cut the guy going through the smoke. And also, if anyone didn't catch this, the guy going through the smoke screaming is Ted Pierce, who I guess was getting his start as a writer at Warner's around this time. And I think he had come from Fleischer's as an in-betweener, or perhaps as a story man. I actually forgot the details. Anyway, a couple interesting things of note in what is sort of an unremarkable but still very competent cartoon, Porky the Fireman. Thank you, Frank Tashlin, our Lord and Savior, for making cool films, even when you didn't want to.
All right. Thank you, Manny, and thank you, Austin. So this one's interesting because, as Austin mentioned, this is a very quick short. It's only 6 minutes long, and yet there's so much packed into it. You do wonder if this one was just done to get it out of the way so Tashlin can focus more on the color merry melodies, which he seemed to enjoy doing a lot more. Regardless, it's fast-paced, it works, and you couldn't tell that he didn't enjoy working with Porkies. So it just shows what a professional Tashlin is. unlike Manny, I never really grew up with this one. I only discovered this one in the Looney Tunes Golden Collection and then rediscovered it later on the Porky Pig 101 collection. So it's not a go too short, but damn, it's funny. If it's on TV, I'd definitely watch it. And even that unfortunate bit, even that can be just easily cut out and doesn't affect the short itself. But still, this short is enjoyable otherwise. This one gets 8 out of 10. It's solid, it's funny, and definitely worth watching. But that will do it for this one. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and until next time, take care.